no, no. No, 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 no.
Hey y'all, this is the Pleasure and Peace Practice, and I'm your host, Tia, your Pleasure and Peace practitioner. For those of you who may be new here, welcome. This is a space where your pleasure is not optional and your peace is sacred. Each episode, we explore things that are real, raw, and I hope restorative. Through honest conversation, evidence-based practice, and an abundance of permission, I encourage you to feel good. Whether you're here to reconnect with your body, unlearn harmful shame, or just take a breath, you belong here. Welcome in. I am really looking forward to today's episode. Today is part 2 of a 2-part series that was inspired by a listener-submitted inquiry. If you have not already listened to part 1, you might want to go back and do so, but these episodes do not necessarily have to be listened to in order. Last time, as a quick recap, we defined perimenopause in clear, accessible terms. We talked about when it starts and early signs you should not ignore. We explored how it intersects with other reproductive experiences, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, also known as PCOS, postpartum, and hormonal birth control. We also grounded all of that in emotional, sexual, and mental well-being. Today, we intend to cover how to navigate these changes, either with a partner or solo, pleasure practices that evolve with your hormones, what to ask your provider, and how to stay connected to yourself when your body feels unfamiliar. All right. Here we go. Unfortunately, many people do not realize that they are in perimenopause until they are already overwhelmed. As we know, evidenced by the listener's submission, there is not much coverage in this area. The medical system often gaslights or minimizes concerns for women, especially women of color, Black women in particular. Thus, early awareness and advocacy can improve your options. When we have more options, we tend to have a better quality of life and a smoother transition for this period of life. So let's say you're listening to this and you're in your 20s, or maybe you have not been exhibiting any symptoms at all. You are not postpartum, don't have PCOS, you're not on hormonal birth control, and you're honestly only listening because you like the sound of my voice. It is still important for you to be aware and check in on yourself periodically. In the same way that it is not wise to wait until your car breaks down to get an oil change or a tire rotation or whatever, it is not wise to wait until you are on empty to take care of yourself. Your body deserves care proactively, not reactively. Excuse me. If you do happen to have a symptom or two, or maybe you are the listener who submitted that inquiry, it's not too late. While never late is better, better late than never. Shout out to Drake. Like with most things, when you inevitably begin perimenopause, symptom management is more effective when you begin earlier. Your sleep, libido, mood, and relationship dynamics will thank you. So, how can we navigate these changes? First, let's talk about how we can do that solo, and then we can do that with a partner. This is a season of reclaiming yourself. Remember, your body is yours. Your sexuality belongs to you. You get to decide at every stage of life what intimacy looks like. No matter who is in the room with you, the only person you are ever responsible for is you. In this new season, it might be helpful to try a new routine. Create a sensual ritual if you don't already have one, or practice self touch without any pressure. If you are with a partner, navigating these changes has to include honest, shame free conversation. Think about the other person as a clean slate. Maybe do some role play. Maybe revisit the place of your first date or your first sexual experience together. Now is the time to learn each other again. Revisit what feels good. If you need some support in the area of communication, maybe try the line of, lately, I've noticed, fill in the blank, and I'd love to explore how we can stay connected through it. When we consider pleasure practices that evolve with your hormones, we are considering what brings us comfort, what makes us curious, and what encourages connection, not just arousal. Getting a good lube and or vaginal moisturizer is a great place to start. I am a big fan of Uber Lube myself. It is a bit pricey as far as lubes go, but you don't need a lot and it is very worth it. You're just going to have to trust me. If you have any lubes or vaginal moisturizers that you are already using and swear by, I'd love to hear about them, either in the comments, in my DMs, or in my anonymous section. Don't be shy. Share the love. Share the lube. Other things you might do include temperature or texture play. I have a really funny story about that actually. I was engaging with some temperature play with a partner, and they placed the ice directly on my clitoris. For me, this was an absolute not, and it caused me to jump up. And also, my my clitoris was super, super numb. Now, while I'm all for adventure, I do not recommend that when you're playing around, but I do recommend you play. And hopefully, whoever you're playing with is open to laughing and making mistakes. There will be plenty of them. And that's really part of the fun. Other pleasure practices might include breath work, hip opening stretches, pelvic floor massage. These things don't need to be sexual, although if they happen to be and you're enjoying it, go with that. But grounding, affirming, and therapeutic is really what we are after. Remember, comfort, curiosity, and connection. Finally, you might also do some journaling. What I have in mind right now is fantasy journaling. Again, it doesn't have to be sexual, but if it is, great. Maybe you have some ideas about what could bring you comfort, or you're curious about what it would be like to come home and not have to empty the dishwasher. I know I have said this before, but it bears repeating. Connection is the point. This is not a time to point fingers or incite blame. Connect with your partner in ways that are playful. Connect with your partner in ways that invite curiosity. If you are having trouble communicating effectively, let me know about where you feel stuck in my DMs, in the comments, or in the anonymous submission section. I would love to help. The point is, pleasure in perimenopause is not gone, but it will likely be different. Make some space for it. Think of it as an adventure. These are new ways to feel good. So, up to this point, we have discussed why we don't want to wait until things are terrible before seeking help, along with some ways to navigate these changes with ourselves, with our partner or partners, should we have any. Now, I think it's a good time to discuss what to talk about with your provider should you determine it's a good time to ask a professional for some assistance. I want to reiterate that not all providers are trained in menopause or perimenopause care. And so, as we discussed in the last episode, I highly recommend you search menopause.org for a provider that has committed more time to this subject. For a more inclusive and affirming provider, it might be wise to cross examine that list with one on glma.org. Okay, so things we can ask. Perhaps you request a hormone panel, blood work. Perhaps you ask about your vaginal health, mood changes, or fatigue, rather than focusing in on your bleeding patterns or the lack thereof. Menstruation or amenorrhea is not the whole story. Maybe inquire about both hormone therapy and non hormonal support. Remember, you're not being dramatic, nor are you imagining things. You are allowed to ask for answers. You are your best advocate. You are your best thing, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. If you are the listener who submitted that inquiry, or you are someone who has also been searching for information and not finding much, I hope that this two-part episode has been helpful for you. It is okay to mourn a version of your body or yourself that you no longer feel connected to. Name that grief. In past episodes, we have discussed a bit of mirror work to affirm yourself. Another question to ask if you're doing that activity, what parts of you still feel like you? It is normal to sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself, but you have to remember that you are still you. You have joy, strength, and sensuality. You can reconnect with all of it. And I hope that I can help you do it. To recap, you do not have to wait until you are in the throes of perimenopause to begin healing. Be proactive by being curious. If you enjoyed this two-part episode and are interested in more, stay tuned. Next time, we're going to be mapping out the journey of pleasure across our lives, from our first period to our last. As we know, pleasure doesn't start with sex, and it doesn't end with menopause. Next time, we're going to talk about what no one tells us about desire, cycles, and body changes across every chapter, from puberty to postpartum, and of course, perimenopause. This is not about quote unquote fixing the body. This is about understanding it. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss it. It's time now for our anonymous segment, Whisper in My Ear, a space for your questions, curiosities, and confession. No shame, no judgment, just real talk and truth. Today's anonymous something I scoured from internet forums, and it's in the form of a letter. All right, here we go. Anonymous says, I've been married for many years and I love my husband, but I've never told him I fantasize about women. I'm not even sure what that means about me, but I'm scared that bringing it up will change everything. I just want to be honest and still feel safe. How do I start this conversation? I love this letter, and to whoever wrote it, if you're listening, I, for one, am proud of you for taking the first step in choosing to be honest with yourself about your desires. Now, before we get started, You don't mention your gender, so I'm going to presume for the purpose of this podcast that you are a person who identifies as a woman. If I'm wrong, or if you feel like maybe like some information um, to the contrary of that, please let me know. But okay, moving forward. Without knowing anything about the author of this letter other than what they wrote in, I have to start out by saying the implication here, from what I understand, is that you are being somehow dishonest by not telling your husband that you fantasize about women. I want you to know that your sexuality, your fantasies are your business. I understand that you're married, but every single thing that crosses your mind is not necessarily something you have to share if you don't want to. You are allowed to keep some things for yourself. Let's focus on what you said about not being sure what these fantasies mean about you, and that you're scared that bringing it up will change everything. Having a fantasy about women or anything or anyone really doesn't necessarily mean anything about you. Prior to bringing it up with your husband, especially since you mentioned some fear around it, I would encourage you to explore what you believe it means, if anything, for yourself. Based on your letter, it is unclear how long you have had these fantasies. And honestly, I don't know that it really matters either way. You affirm that you love your husband, and I believe you. You mentioned that you want to feel safe, and I want that for you as well. Before you start the conversation, in the interest of your own safety, I would encourage you to get clearer with yourself about what you want from this conversation that you say only you know how you feel and what you want. Are you interested in exploring outside of your current relationship? Are you interested in exploring with your partner? Are you looking for a divorce? Are you wanting your husband to stop making homophobic comments? Without knowing your own motivation for the conversation, you set yourself up for failure. And that also limits the advice that I can give. So, if I were you, I would start there. If you need support figuring it out, I encourage you to search for a therapist if you do not already have one. I discussed in an earlier episode my favorite directory, inclusivetherapists.org. Additionally, you could check out the Google Doc, Am I a Lesbian? Written by Angeli Luz. Again, this is presuming that you are a person who identifies as a woman writing in. There are, of course, so many different attractions, and no one is saying you have to pick one at all. But if you are curious about your feelings, that's another great resource to check out. If you happen to be a man or a person who identifies as a man who wrote in about this, it's okay that maybe your sexuality is fluid. That happens too. I hope this was helpful. For those listening, remember that if you have any questions, comments, curiosities, or want to respond in any way, do not hesitate to comment, slide in my DMs, or comment anonymously via the link in the summary portion of this show. You can also find that link in the bio section of my social media on Instagram and Threads. Until next time, I'm Tia, your pleasure and peace practitioner, reminding you new episodes drop every Wednesday. Be sure to follow, rate, and share the show if this resonated with you. Talk to y'all soon. Thank you for being here, for listening, for getting curious with me. Whether it's a question, a story, or a truth, still finding words, this space is for you. Whatever it is, you don't have to hold it alone. Ask, share, confess. We're in this together. And if you've got something on your heart, drop it anonymously using the link in the show notes or over on Instagram. If this episode moved you, helped you, or made you feel seen, share it with a friend, leave a rating, or drop a comment. Your support helps this space grow. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at Pleasure and Peace with Tia for more. Until next time, remember, I've got you and you've got this. Talk to y'all soon.